Hello and welcome to the Overland Journal podcast. I'm your host, Matt Scott. I'm here with my co-host, Scott Brady.
Hey, guys.
Yeah, we're stoked here to have Dave Harriton from AEV, American Expedition Vehicles, with us. Today, we're going to be talking about basically everything this dude has learned about what it takes to build a factory Overlander. There's so many things that you're not considering. We were just talking about transfer case, chain integrity on specific lift sizes and wheel sizes for models. There's going to be a lot of information in this podcast. We really hope that you take it to heart, because there's a lot of really good information here that I don't think anybody else in the world has.
And a special thanks to Warner, home of the Ineos Grenadier and the Mercedes-Benz Van Center, Warner. Whether you're traveling through canyon country in your Sprinter or across continents in your Grenadier, Warner has become a trusted stop for serious overlanders. I have personally serviced my quartermaster at Warner and have seen the work they do to their successful Rebel Rally competition Grenadiers. Matt Scott has experienced Warner too, helping his father-in-law buy a Grenadier from the dealership a few months ago. Warner has become known for supporting travelers in both Grenadiers and Sprinters, whether it's outfitting, maintenance, or helping with complex expedition builds. I have seen their team contribute to the community through sponsoring events, Rebel Rally teams, vehicle training, and remote technical support. It also helps that Tony Warner is an Overlander himself, so he is committed to fitting high-quality components and helping fellow travelers. As a thank you for the podcast listeners, they are offering $500 off a new or used Ineos or Sprinter, or 10% off parts and service up to $500. Just tell them you heard about it on the Overland Journal podcast. Thanks again, Tony and the Warner team, for your support of this week's podcast. Yeah, you're definitely that guy, Dave. I mean, the fact that you've worked with so many different manufacturers, so you've worked closely with Jeep, you worked closely with Ram, you work closely with GM, which includes GMC and Chevrolet models. So you've worked with these OEM engineers, and you've probably learned a lot along the way of like what you need to be paying attention to on these things. And then you can apply, those that are listening can apply those same thoughts to their own modifications. If you're doing something aftermarket to your car, think about some of these things that Dave's going to talk about, so that you can keep it within the best possible range of performance and reliability.
Yeah. So where do we start? There's so much going on here, man.
Yeah, and it's true. I'm probably one of the very unique people in the world that have taken both the aftermarket side and the OEM side and combine them, right? Because they both have their unique challenges and goals. And then, here I am trying to combine the two, which is challenging, very challenging.
Well, maybe we start with that, though. You were just talking a few minutes ago about, with the aftermarket, your goals are different than they are when you're working with an OEM. So maybe help people frame that a little bit when they're buying an aftermarket component as opposed to a turnkey truck.
Yeah, sure. So it's almost like the logic tree is different. If you're sitting there with your aftermarket hat on, you have a certain number of tools in your quiver, and you're looking at, your goal might be, okay, we need a lift kit for 35-inch tires on X vehicle. And so, the number one goal is, right, okay, we're going to fit this tire on there. We need full steering clearance and we need full suspension travel. And then, you're weighing like, okay, it's got to be, the market would only handle this price point. Which parts can we do? Which parts, how's everyone else doing it? Let's baseline that. Now turns out that's probably not the right way. That's because it costs so much more to do it the right way. Here's what we could do. Here's how we can do it the right way and still be cost effective. It's just a different set of goals. When you look at it with the OEM hat on, the nice thing is the volume is there that you can always do it the right way, but you're looking at it from a different set of goals. So now you're taking into effect cooling, the actual cooling that the aftermarket doesn't have the data on what the cooling package should be doing. Modal, right? Like, are those bumpers lighting up when because of the suspension on a washboard, right? I mean, it's stuff that the aftermarket just doesn't have the information to even consider, right? Their goal is to put a 35-inch tire on this vehicle. when you're looking at from the OEM, it's a 35-inch tire, but you're going all the way through, like you mentioned, transfer case chains.
Yeah, it's like everything that you
exist.
change, like every action has like a reaction down the line. You strengthen one thing and then it breaks the next thing.
Well, and even airflow, right? I mean, most people don't realize a lot of the cooling effectiveness comes from the vacuum generated under the car. And when you start lifting the car, putting 35-inch tires,
Changing skid plates.
a lot of that stuff can change rapidly, and you can make the cooling really ineffective. And then on the aftermarket side, a customer might do all this stuff and be like, this brand, fill in the blank, right? This brand's cooling sucks.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it was fine, and you did something that you didn't think had any possibility to affect that, but turns out it really does.
We're obviously in my Earth Roamer, and I had one of those mesh grills because in my mind I'm like, oh, this is going to flow more. It should in theory have more surface area. I had like this chrome grill that I really hated. This truck was always having problems with overheating going up hills. I changed back to the factory grill. I took the spotlights off the front. I run like 65 mile an hour up hills that I would be able to do like 45.
Yep.
The only things that changed.
I mean, so, it's one of those things. A lot of consumers, we were just talking about this morning, there's pain points that consumers don't even know exist when they're changing stuff. For instance, are you ruining the vacuum under the car? That's something you don't consider when you're like putting a different grill on. It's not really, it's how much suction you're getting through the radiator. And then when we're doing it on the OEM level, they literally give us like, okay, you're going to have 15,000 square millimeters of open area on the grill. And if you put lights in the front, you have to subtract that out. And so you might have 20,000, but when you start putting lights on the front, I mean, and they get down to like within a millimeter or two, you're not going to pass.
Sure.
And then we're doing all the CFD. So we're studying, okay, when you lift the vehicle, when you're doing this, even just changing the rake angle on the truck can have some pretty dramatic effects on the cooling. So it's really interesting, but most consumers don't understand that it's that sensitive. And also, a lot of the trucks are pretty tolerant. So if you do start affecting the cooling, they just start backing the power out without you even knowing.
Yeah.
So again, you think, oh, this fill in the blank truck, it doesn't have enough power. Well, it's not just gearing, it's not just the tires, it can be,
It's preserving itself.
It can be preserving itself.
They're pretty smart these days too. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They don't want to be paying for.
And your AC will drop down. You're cool. So you're hot and you're like, why isn't the AC working? You're cranking it up and it's not. And you also talked about corrosion. I mean, I think the other two topics maybe we touch on is corrosion and then NVH. I mean, a lot of people go with these very expensive suspension systems. They can be $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $10,000. And then a couple years later, it's a rattle trap and they're exhausted driving the car. It squeaks and it rattles. Let's talk a little bit about corrosion resistance and then NVH.
Yeah. It's always kind of like what sounds good on paper to a consumer might not be very good.
Yeah.
Sounds good on paper, whether it's some of the more complex suspensions. And then when it comes to reality and depending on where you live and corrosion and, what works on a race truck does not work on a street truck.
Let's talk about that because I think that's the key point is the difference between a race truck, which is going to do one race.
We were talking about this on our last podcast. We did like a principles of overlanding. Intentional vehicle modification. People try to do too much with their trucks. They try and have a rock crawler pre-runner overland truck and they put Heim joints on it or rose joints and they're like, oh man, it's always in the shop. This sucks, or this frame isn't, the frame on XYZ truck sucks. It rounded out or ovaled out a hole. Like, yeah, because you put a spherical bearing on it.
My rule of thumb is if the truck has a stock frame, it's not going to go fast, typically. You're just not for long. So,
that's the point.
And there's some exceptions to that. I mean, there is like the class 3 trucks that have been modified and do work, but, they're not, from a marketing standpoint, you're not going to be out there doing what, the trophy trucks or, even close, right?
And these are professional drivers too. So
they're professional drivers. and half the challenge on like, something like class 3 truck is just, it's strategy and it's getting to the end. It's not driving fast.
Exactly.
Right. So that's where a normal consumer, they get confused that, oh, I'm just going to take this, let's say a Colorado or Toyota, whatever, and we're going to put some fancy shocks on it, and we're going to be able to go fast and jump high, which you can to a point, but there's a pretty fine line there with OEM components. And then with aftermarket components, you're right, like the Heim joints and stuff like that, they're taking race truck technology, which race trucks get rebuilt every race pretty much. They don't deal with magnesium chloride on the road or sodium chloride on the road. They just don't have the same noise and vibration and harshness issues. You're wearing a helmet, you're getting air pumped in there, and you're not hearing any of that stuff, right? And then try and daily drive one of those trucks, it doesn't really work.
It wear you out. Just absolutely wear you out.
I think, the Colorado Bison's probably as close to that one does it all, for somebody that, with factory engineering. I think that's as close as you can get to that solution. You can go pretty fast. In testing, we've jumped them ridiculously high in the sand, right?
And it has a factory provision for like an air bump, like a jounce bump.
Yeah, hydraulic jounce.
Yeah, it's got hydraulic jounce bumps, which are a big deal. But they can only you're still putting that energy in the frame, right? So you're still it still has limits. So it's important for consumers to understand those limits. But yeah, taking an aftermarket suspension, race trucks generally have low frequency springs, so and that generally doesn't work very well on roads or carrying loads or doing overland type stuff. But it's just one of those things. Sometimes you got to realize, consumers have to realize mixing and matching stuff there's challenges to that.
Yeah,
you're generally not going to end up with a really good combination of stuff. You like XYZ's brand of marketing on their suspension. You think their shocks look cool.
And they do look cool. To be fair,
sure.
Like race truck shocks look awesome.
Well, and
how much of that is just valving as well, though? Like it's not necessarily the shock. Like a shock in concept is fairly simple until you get into the advanced valving. Like
it's
the
pretty
DSSV
nuanced
stuff.
Pretty nuanced. And I'll tell you the other, like my kind of rule of thumb, if I see a shock that looks really fancy, generally on the aftermarket side, and if it doesn't have rebound damping, I pretty much write it off as not a real shock.
Yeah, for sure.
So like with, on our side, like my personal company, AEV, our shocks generally don't have adjustment because we're doing all the rebounding, compression damping for what we intend the vehicle to do. We're doing it with professional shock tuners. And, I've talked about this before. We might go out and hit one bump on a test track. We might literally sit there for 3-4 days revalving shocks for one bump, different loads, maybe a couple different spring sets, but we'll be working on that, working front and rear on one bump because we can tell a lot just with one bump, over and over, repeatable. Whereas a lot of the shock companies, suspension companies, they go out, they have a favorite section of the road, they run down, and it's kind of seat at the pants. It's not instrumented. It's just kind of is what it is. So we try and introduce more science on our side. But if I see a shock that looks really fancy and doesn't have rebound adjustment, like if they're getting in the rebound adjustment, then I'm like, okay, this is a real shock. But now does a consumer know what they're doing to tune it or to adjust it? It's mostly marketing.
And I think that's where like the Multimatics are so interesting to me. Like it's one of the high performance shocks. It's a factory fitment from some of the GM vehicles. Don't they have an exclusive on that for 4-wheel drives?
Maybe for 4-wheel drive.
Yeah.
But, I think a lot of the performance cars, I think the new Mustang, that $400,000 Mustang, it's got them. The Ford GT, it's mostly on-road. But, it's interesting.
They run that tech in like LMP cars.
Yeah.
Like
it's a complete
crazy
rethink of the shock absorber, right? If you look at it's not a deflective disc shock.
Yeah.
And the way the oil cycles through the shock, it's a complete rethink, which is good. It's not that a deflective disc or external bypass shock doesn't have a lot of technology. Just like angles of the little cones on top. There's so much
little
nuance.
flutter stacks and all those things that adjust it. Yeah.
Even if you check out the discs and just look at the nuance of where the holes are and the sizing on the external bypasses and the cone shapes and there's a lot to those shocks that people just don't understand. And if you're looking at a shock and it looks really fancy and it's got a nice reservoir and all that, and you just like the way it looks, great. If you're thinking it's really going to work, it's kind of like you got to do your research because
and you still have a stock frame. That's the thing you got to remember.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's not a ticket to go fast.
Not
for sure.
No. No, it's just not. Not really. And most consumers don't really have a comparison, of this shock versus that shock versus this shock. They buy it, they're expensive, so you're not going to buy 3 sets and then go out and compare it. And just the human nature of it, human psychology, right? You pay a lot of money and, and it may be better. You may not be able to tell it's better. You want to think it's better. Your confirmation bias is going to be that it's better.
Yeah.
Right. It sort of gets into human psychology and a lot of stuff. So then, and that stuff gets transferred back to the internet, which gets transferred back to sales. So, there's some unique challenges there in the marketing handle or marketing aspect. And that's something, it's funny. AEV is actually, we're not a marketing company, right? We're an engineering company. We have a really hard time telling that story because we're more interested in engineering and getting a product out that we think the consumer will really like and appreciate. But we're bad at marketing, right? And then you look at other companies, they're marketing companies, and they do a great job of doing that. We do a terrible job generally. We're trying to improve that, right? We've got some great...
Well, we're grateful that you guys make great product. And that's how you ended up working for GM and working for, building products for Ram and
it is, yeah.
all of that.
Yeah, one of the unique things, we just had sales week last week at our place in Michigan, and we were talking about it, and it's really interesting because we have a great crew of folks, and they're all willing to... Like we look at a product and we look at our costs and our design costs and our manufacturing costs, and then most companies would just add the profit on top that they want to see, going through dealers and all this stuff, right? And it stacks up to a cost that's just not feasible. And it's pretty interesting because I've got 2 partners, but we're willing to say, okay, we're willing to take less. We're willing to not put that whatever 40% margin or whatever on top, and we're willing to do it for way less just to get that product out there because we think it's just the right thing to do. It's cool, right? Whether it's a steel stamp bumper, I mean, our costs are way higher than everyone else's, and we still retail them for about the same cost. And so you start looking at that, and it's like we do that because we have a passionate group of engineering folks that want to get this technology out there and show people. But it's challenging, right?
I can't imagine.
It's challenging. And then we do take all that OEM lessons learned, all those OEM lessons learned, and we do put it back into our aftermarket side. We were just talking about the bumpers and the gaps. We have this, let's say, a 1-inch gap below the headlamps. And you look at a truck that's flexed out, and one side it's basically touching, the other side it's a 2-inch gap. And that's because the frame's flex. And then you look at most of the bumpers around, like where we're sitting, and they look real nice and static. But then if you were to like slow motion that thing off-road, I mean, literally you're seeing your headlamps moving, the fenders moving.
I see so many like Toyota bumpers in particular.
They're right,
they'll
right on it.
The factory plastic bumper, but it's like a clearance fit, like it's touching and it's like...
And some of that's okay. If you're just cutting a plastic fascia, the fascia will move. But there's a lot of those that are right up under the headlamp, right? And so that headlamp is hard plastic.
But even if it's hitting the fascia, like...
It's going to
cause a couple
good.
thousand miles of corrugation. And it's going to...
Cause some corrosion issues.
Yeah.
That's typically corrosion issues. But when you look at it, like when you see a Ford or a Toyota where it's right up under the headlamp, it's going to cause issues over time. And that's where you start to get those intangibles like, this car's really rattly. I don't remember it being this rattly. Well, if you slow motion videoed that front end moving off-road, like on a washboard, you'd see why everything all of a sudden kind of feels rattly, and there's no way to like fix it, right? It's not like you're tightening up screws.
Sure.
Like everything just loosened up. And a lot of it's because of, things like that.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I remember you were looking at the factory bull bar and the Ineos even, and like Dave kind of like goes up to something and just like starts like violently shaking it, and he's like, yeah, that sucks. And then he just like kind of walks away, and you're like, but it looks so good.
Well, actually, that's an exaggeration.
I'm exaggerating.
What I did is I went up and I actually did it like a tuning fork test where that thing was unsupported out at the edge, and I just tap it, right? And then I sit back and I watch it vibrate.
Yeah.
And that's like, okay, yep. You can see that that's going to be a problem over time. Same thing with tire carriage. If you can go up to any tire carrier, like on the back of a Jeep or, camper or whatever, and if you can move it, that will light up on a washboard, and it's not going to last long. I mean, anything, if you can even move it, it's not. And that's like tire carriers are a very, very challenging engineering problem.
But what a great example for those that are listening to think about. When you're at an Overland Expo, this is where we're recording this podcast, is at Overland Expo, and you're looking for that swing out tire carrier, go up and smack that thing with your fist and see if it vibrates, and then grab the tire and try to move it.
Yeah.
If it shakes,
if it
when
even
it's brand
moves.
new.
Yeah, if it even moves. But it's kind of like a lot of them, you can go up and very gently, like one finger, you can just start rocking it, and it'll get into that natural harmonic frequency. And pretty soon, you know, the whole truck's bouncing. And I just touched it with one finger.
The
Yeah.
Forerunners are the worst because there's no good way to put.
Yeah.
They're
bumper
challenging.
on those
I mean,
trucks.
on all the trucks, it's
Yeah.
it's one of the most challenging things to handle.
And the tires are so heavy. Yeah, it's the Dave Harriton one finger death punch.
I can show you guys. I'm not going to name any names.
I
but,
watched you do it on that will not be named camper vehicle. Yes.
But we can, yeah. I mean, literally, I can get a 250-pound tire going with one finger.
Yeah.
You know, not doing anything.
Yeah.
And then you know, if you keep doing it and just keep it going on that frequency, it's kind of like swing set, right? You just keep kind of pumping the swing set with your one finger. Pretty soon, the entire frame of the truck will be bouncing, and it just will destroy itself over time. And it's kind of like, it's how much time
Sure.
is the question.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
I guess a lot of this stuff. I mean, there's guys that are genuinely using the products, and then there's kind of the automotive restyling side. And if you're only driving, I guess, you know, back
Your
and forth,
commute,
you're
yeah, sure.
commuting or whatever, that's fine. You know, that's I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but your use cases can be different. So those people can have really good experiences with a product, and then somebody who's really using it can have a totally drastically different experience.
So we just had sales week, like I said, back in Michigan. We were bringing all of our sales team, and we were going through wheels and wheel testing with our sales folks, and they didn't understand some of the wheel testing. And there's a radial test where you actually take the wheel and bolt it down, and then they bolt an axle shaft to it, and it kind of moves around eccentrically, and it literally bends the whole disc of the wheel, right? And it's like some of those tests. There's another one. There's static, radial. There's a bunch of different tests. There's like 3 major tests, but it really has everything to do with tire size because
of the leverage.
Because of the leverage, right? So I think as far as I know, we're one of the very few companies. So when we do a wheel and we rate it at whatever 4,100 pounds, we're testing that with a 41-inch tire, and it's crazy because the tires can't get through the tests. So, I mean, we are burning up an immense amount of tires, like 40, 41-inch tires, to get through these tests. But, you know, most wheel companies are literally going to their wheel supplier. They're saying, hey, this is what we want the A side to look like. This is the size and the offset we want, and these are the colors we want, and that's it. We actually do all the engineering, and then we work with the wheel company to kind of work through that. But we're doing it, we're testing it. So if you buy a Wrangler, I mean, I think we're doing it with 40-inch tires. If you're buying a Ram, I think we're doing it 42-inch tires. Like, we kind of go up
Yeah, sure.
one size, even though most of our Wranglers are 37s and most of our Rams are
gives you some
40s.
Yeah.
It gives us some room. So when we do that, we're doing those load tests with those tires. And I think Weld used to do it, but I don't know of anybody else really doing it. So
I don't actually know if I've even on the marketing side heard anybody talk about that. It's like
No.
the wheel testing thing is something I've been like recently.
I wonder if Hutchinson does that.
A special thanks to Hankook Dynapro Tires for supporting this week's podcast. Visit expeditionportal.com to see our content series in partnership with Hankook, where you'll learn about this year's Jeep Beach event in Daytona, Florida, get tips on exploring the Ocala National Forest, and take a tour of the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America at the Daytona International Speedway. We also take a close look at how to choose a mud terrain, all-terrain, or hybrid rugged terrain tire using the Hankook Dynapro tire lineup as examples.
I would venture to guess that they have a very specific use case. So they're generally designing for military vehicles with a
Right.
specific tire.
They do a load rating for sure.
Yeah,
Because I know the wheels
they
on this
would.
truck.
But if you think about an aftermarket company, they don't know if you're putting a 235, 75, 17 on or a 41.
Yeah.
And so generally, the wheel companies will just go ahead and test with that, standard tire, maybe an OEM size or maybe just standard size, 235. They don't really know what these wheels are going on, whether they're going on a Forerunner or a Ram or whatever, right? our wheels are very specific, and so we, you know, it's a benefit for us. We can really test specifically for the, you know, for that vehicle with that fitment in mind and that tire in mind. And so if you just go out and buy an aftermarket wheel at, you know, a tire store, chances that it are rated, that it's been tested for 37s is virtually nil.
Wow.
I mean, so are they just overbuilding the crap out of these wheels?
No,
and
no,
hoping, or they're just,
you'll end up with failures.
yeah.
100%.
Yeah, there's so many of these, like, I'm going to call them kind of fly-by-night wheel companies that are out there because the sourcing is just relatively easy. The design's not incredibly complex. It's one piece. You have your tooling.
A lot of wheel companies
done
are
in
actually
China.
marketing companies.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And that's the,
And
that's
some of them are doing a really good job at marketing, like we talked about with the shocks.
100%. So most wheel companies, it's a, you know, like you said, it's more of a matter of personal taste. It's not really a functional thing. I mean, there's exceptions like the Hutchinson or, you know, some of the other, there are some exceptions, but for most part, a wheel is, you know, to a consumer, a wheel's a wheel. You're looking for that stance. You're looking for the color. You're looking for the
styling.
you know, just the styling that you like, that's kind of sets the tone for the vehicle. So a lot of it's just personal preference, but there are some technical things like, you know, is it really rated for that vehicle and the weight of your vehicle? You know, like, okay, you know, you put a tent on your Ineos and you're, you know, those things are already 6,500 pounds, and now, you know, now you're over 7,000 pounds.
Sure.
And you bought a wheel, you know, that's, you know, maybe it's 2,600 pounds per wheel.
Sure.
And, you know, and that was with a 35-inch tire.
Yeah,
Or with
sure.
a 32-inch tire. Now you put 35s on it, say.
Sure.
You know, now you're just waiting for something to break in the backcountry.
Yeah, I think the only thing that helps the Ineos a little bit is that it's the same wheel as the Sprinter, so those are going to be really heavy duty applications, which
I just happened to
helps a
pick
little
that
bit.
one out,
That
but-
helps a little bit, I think. But
Yeah.
now, one of the things that I think it'd be great to talk about on the wheel side, because this is unique, is you guys, and even for the OEMs, you do this. You provide wheels that can be configured as a standard mounting configuration where the bead is inside the wheel width, and then you have another configuration where the outer bead can be placed outside of that rim face and then used with a bead lock. So let's talk a little bit about, I mean, how did you get that to even be street legal? Because most bead locks are not DOT legal. So
Compliant,
talk people through that.
Yeah, so there's a lot of history and legacy there. So, you know, when you say it's not DOT legal, if you go back, a lot, you know, bead locks weren't being made as a wheel normally. They were a ring. You took an off the shelf aftermarket wheel, you cut the outer bead off, then you welded on
Sure.
an aluminum ring that was your inner bead seat. You know, machine it down, recoat it, and then you have the outer. So where that was not legal was, you know, you're taking a street legal wheel that's already been tested and you're cutting it up and re-welding, right? So now that
Sure.
testing would have to be redone and would have to be done on individual wheels because every wheel's individually modified. So that's kind of the legacy and the history of
That's helpful to know. I didn't know that. That's awesome.
why they're quote unquote not legal. Technically, a beadlock wheel today that's made as a beadlock, like ours, you know, that whole piece that was being welded on is cast in and it's tested that way, tested in both configurations. So as a standard mounting, it's just a normal wheel. As the in the beadlock configuration, it's technically considered a two-piece wheel. And we're doing all the same tests with that two-piece configuration. So 2- and 3-piece wheels are legal. There might be one state or two states that maybe they aren't, but I think for the most part, you know, that's not the issue. So it really comes down to being tested and then not, you know, not violating that test.
But as far as I'm aware, you have AEV wheels that are tested to be DOT legal, and then Hutchinson again are DOT approved. I'm not familiar with any others that are DOT legal.
I'm not either. They probably exist because all you have to do is go through the testing, but it's not easy. You know, we've definitely found limits to doing that.
Well, maybe some Ford factory wheels.
Oh yeah, yep. Ford
Yeah.
factory has done it. That's right.
Mopar has one.
Mopar.
Yeah.
Yep. Power Wagon has one.
Yeah, so some factory fitments.
Yeah, but there's a lot of testing to do, and you know, and that's the expensive part of. Honestly, that's the expensive part of making wheel, besides just inventorying them,
Sure.
is the testing. So, you know, if you go back to aftermarket wheels, right? This is kind of an interesting tidbit. Most wheels are made in China. we used to have some wheels in the United States. In fact, when I first started making wheels, they were made in California. Everything was great. The Chinese government subsidized it. I mean, this kind of relates to today.
Subsidizes the energy for the
Well,
casting
So
process.
this is going back, into the 90s, but they subsidized wheels 17%, I think it was, for about 15 years. And what ended up happening is not only were their labor and their environmental costs less, but they, like I got a call one day from my wheel supplier and he said, hey, we're no longer going to be making these wheels in the U.S., right? Because everything I do is made in the U.S. except for our wheels. So I said, okay. He said, but the good news is we're selling the same machines. We're selling them to our Chinese partners. The people who are running these machines are going to China. So it's the same people, same machines. You're going to get the same wheel quality. And by the way, they're going to be $20 per wheel cheaper. Okay. I guess that sounds okay. I'm not real thrilled about it, but okay. That ended up happening with just about every aluminum wheel plant in the country. So I think there's 2 OEM wheel plants still in the country, but I mean, unless you're going to make 50,000 of each wheel, they don't even want to talk to you. And so basically there's no way to make an aftermarket cast aluminum wheel in the United States today.
So you'd have to machine one.
You can machine them, but that's,
Again,
you're talking
impossible.
$10,000 for a set of wheels.
That's right. That's right.
So, and then there's people that will bring in forgings, and then finish the wheels here with some machining and whatnot. But to do just a regular cast aluminum wheel, like 99% of wheels are, you can't do in the United States anymore. So,
Wow.
So we were forced to go to China. Everybody is. We do some wheels in Italy now. We do some wheels in Taiwan. So our company's trying to diversify. But getting back to that, so this is kind of the history and the legacy of that market. When we do wheels, like, yes, the wheel companies do initial testing. They'll come back and say, hey, you're going to have some problems here and here and here. Okay, we'll change those.
And is
We'll
there
do
a
this.
certification for that? Because there's always a stamp that I see on wheels, like JI.
Yeah, and I forget. Yeah, J.
It's a J, and then it looks like some scribbles.
It's an SAE standard. Yes,
Yeah.
There's standard tests that you have to pass. SAE.
So if you don't see that on a wheel, like run,
You'll see that, and the Chinese will put that in regardless. But so what I was getting at is they do the wheel testing. So most companies just rely on the wheel testing that's done in China.
Yeah, sure.
When we bring up, like, before we do a wheel, we do our own independent testing. So we send them to a lab right down the street in Michigan, and we do all the same tests that they already did, and we verify, because we've learned the hard way that Chinese tests aren't necessarily the same as tests done in another country. So like our Italian wheels they're great. They're high quality. They cost more. The ones that we're doing in Taiwan are they're really good quality too, and somewhere in between.
Yeah,
right.
sure.
So we've been trying to get more and more out of that, but just I think the point is like even the testing.
yeah.
If you get a wheel made in China, it's going to pass the test.
That's
right?
also one of the cool things with you guys being in Michigan, is you have all of those resources. Like I always felt like there's things that, I'm like, oh man, Michigan, that sucks, because I'm from Illinois, and I'm like, oh, the Midwest sucks, angsty kid. But there's things that you couldn't do anywhere else.
There's no other lab. There's probably not another one of those labs. There's probably one down like South Carolina or someplace down south. I think there's a lab, but and maybe other companies do. I'm not saying that nobody else does this, and but we've definitely learned, like, hey, we have to do our own independent testing to make sure we don't have problems, because we have been bid on that before. We've learned the hard way over the last 30 years.
Well, I remember you told me a story when you were just getting started. You had some problems with some coatings.
Oh.
And it it was like almost a company ender. And it's like, I've had those things happen too, of like, we tested a product and they were not happy with the results, and they came after us lawyered up for telling the truth. And we had to provide all of this testing that we did and then recreate the test and send them the results again. And they were prepared to like put us out of business for speaking, the truth about their product.
Yeah, that can be a tough, like, for us manufacturing a product, right? I think what you're talking about was a Cherokee bumper we tried to do years and years ago, original XJ Cherokee. And we paid for, top dollar for all the engineering, paid top dollar for all the laser cutting and bending, and we, welding. We had all this just beautiful product, and then we send it to a local powder coater. We get the powder coat put on it. We send it to the customer. Standard powder coat fails in 18 months. And then, basically, I mean, it was bad, right? They were rusting. I mean, even though we paid for all the best stuff underneath,
Yep.
we had to buy them all back at retail, right? So that was like, at the time, that was
Oh, it hurts. It hurts.
yeah, you might as well have just like taped $100 boxes to, or $100 to boxes and send them out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was so you have to be really careful about that on the aftermarket side, especially. And coatings is one of the, it's a very difficult thing in a lot of places in the country. If you live in Southern California, who cares? You got, anything will last. But when you get into, Michigan, Montana, Idaho, anywhere up north, where they're using a lot of salts and sprays, 18 months is standard powder coat. So, when we do OEM, we have to do for all over the world and supply a 15-year warranty on that. So we
On
do
the finish.
Yeah, we do a lot of
And
testing.
you were telling me like how many steps there are to that process of coating on like on the OE side on
It
the
depends.
bumper side.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it can be multiple steps. The testing can be months, going into 100% humidity, 100% or 100-degree temps, gravel. Where we're throwing gravel at 80 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Just doing all those tests to make sure the coatings are right. But yeah, I mean, we do. Sometimes we'll start with a raw material that has zinc pressed into the outside surface of the steel. It's called the galvanneal. We'll start with that. Then we will generally zinc coat, zinc coat. Then we'll e-coat. And e-coat is a liquid where, I think that's probably what you're talking about,
Yeah.
where there's about 12 to 15 different tanks that they go into.
Okay. Yeah. That's what I'm thinking of.
Most of that's like different stages of cleaning. And then, a liquid paint that goes into every little nook and cranny that a welder might have missed, a little pothole. And then a top coat, a powder coat. And even then, honestly, if you're driving and you've got let's say a Ram truck or Jeep and you're really using it and you're out in the all weather all the time, we still recommend, we have a special textured spray paint that you can touch up with because, you just can't.
Stone chips.
Yeah, stones, right? Stones will get under, and all those materials that are underneath will prevent the creep, but you'll still get little spots. And
Sure.
so we still recommend touching it up every 2 to 3 years. If you touch it up every 2 to 3 years, it'll last forever.
And that paint is pretty amazing.
Yep.
Like, I don't
blends
know
right
where you
in.
guys I don't know what magic you put into that spray can, but yeah, I've had a couple AEV bumpers in my life, and I'm like, you put the spray can down, and it's like, I can hardly tell where I painted it.
Yeah, if you do it right, you can't
blends.
tell at all.
It blends
Yep.
perfect. It's amazing.
Yeah, but if you do that and if you do it every, let's say 3 years, you'll never have a problem. That thing will last forever. But it's really, it's the stones that get underneath and then the creep. And that's the problem with most aftermarket coatings. You'll see it start to creep underneath generally after 18 months.
Then the powder coat starts to peel off.
Yeah, and once you get to that point, it's failed. You're done. Right.
So when someone's looking to buy an aftermarket bumper, what are some of those key terms they're going to be looking for on the coatings? So if you're seeing zinc, if you're seeing
so most of the aftermarket, if you're not, let's say in Michigan, where you have access, maybe you have access to e-coat if you do enough volume.
sure,
The best thing you could do would be a zinc coat and then a powder coat.
got it.
It's more expensive. It'll last longer, but you'll still have to stay up with it. You'll still have to paint it at some point over time. If you live in one of those areas like I do, Montana, Idaho, right? We get magnesium chloride, which is different than the sodium chloride they use in some other states. And both are very pervasive and very, very corrosive. So you just have to be really careful. But, that is a problem with aftermarket components. Even like ARB does a really good job, but they're doing steel shot. So then you have steel shot contamination problems, right? So they have to be very careful on that. And then they're doing the zinc and and then maybe some iron phosphate washes, trying to clean it up to get good adhesion.
Sure.
But it's still like, whether it's ours or anybody else's, it's a really difficult thing. I mean, I know we have the best in the market, in the industry, but it's because we're using the OEM coatings, right? So ours are going to be the same as any OEM. But even then, it's not completely infallible if you're really pushing it in all,
And I guess on
temperatures.
some vehicles, it's just not going to be an option to have that.
No.
You're driving a niche vehicle. It's going to be
It
a
is what it is.
fabricated
Yeah.
bumper. Like the market's not going to be large enough for it, unfortunately.
Right.
So it's not always a.
And maybe you
Terrible
live in Arizona, like you guys, and it's not a problem. Right?
Literally, people don't paint cars sometimes,
Yeah.
and they just let them get this nice little
They
like
do.
kind
Patina.
of
Yeah.
rust.
Well, and that's another argument for the factory Overlander is like if you buy a AT4X AEV, you're getting these bitchin' bumpers that are going to last 15 years on the truck. They're
You're
going to
getting
last.
the coatings, you're
yeah.
getting the airbag testing and crash, not just airbags, but crash testing. So that's a good one we could talk about is airbags. It turns out that when you put a giant bumper on a truck and run it into a wall, typically the airbags can definitely be affected. There's certain speeds that are must not deploy. So like if you hit a pole in a parking lot at 6 miles an hour, you have to have a must not deploy. But if you just put an aftermarket bumper on there and you tie those frame rails together really tight and you do a bunch of different things, I mean, you will have a deployment. You can have a premature deployment, which is almost more dangerous than you probably will not have a not deploy. Like let's say you were in a big accident.
Sure.
You're going to go over those G loads and the sensors are going to do their job.
Yeah, because it's like a deceleration acceleration sensor that triggers
For the
these
most
airbags,
part,
right?
it's a graph, right? So they're looking at various curves. So yeah, it's basically acceleration sensors. So you can see if you watch the graph, like let's say the little plastic crush cans in the front of a Jeep, you can actually see a slight deceleration. And then you can see when you get into the crush can underneath, you see a little more deceleration. Then you can see when you're into this part of the frame and this part of the frame, and you can actually very easily see, like when we're doing it with the OEMs, you can very easily see every step of the crash within milliseconds, and you can see like, okay, if this piece is not plastic, if it's this, it's going to change this, and then we're going to, we run the risk of this. So we can tune that. We can tune a lot of those things. Those crush cans are for must not deploy scenarios.
Yeah. And in some vehicles, an airbag deployment can result in the vehicle being totaled.
Yeah, total
Even if it doesn't
or
look like it
immobile.
is.
Or it shows up on Carfax too, like airbag deployed in accident, which may not be a total,
Yep.
but
Yeah.
you see that on a Carfax and you're kind of like,
Well, and yeah, I mean, honestly, even the side airbags, when you start lifting vehicles and changing the moment, and you can change the acceleration, you can get a false deployment on a side airbag.
Could you imagine
Just
going
drive.
down? Oh, jeez.
Well,
That would be shocking.
we've seen it in testing.
Yeah, that's crazy.
We've actually had that happen in testing where it's like, we need to retune this.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that's we learned about that the hard way, right? And that's through testing.
I'd never thought of that.
That'd be terrifying.
Yeah, because you're bouncing down a road. You're going not only faster from an aftermarket suspension with better tuning, let's say, and then you're higher, right? You're literally
just do the
taller.
math, right? Just do the math. You're higher.
The velocity's so much higher.
Yeah. So your side-to-side velocities can be over that threshold where you could detonate a side airbag pretty easily.
Well, remember,
That'd be a headache.
Toyotas for a while had a button that you would need to depress off-road to keep that from happening early on during side curtain.
didn't know
When they first came out with side curtain airbags, certain Lexus models, certain Toyota four-wheel drives,
Didn't the FJ Cruiser have that?
it
as a
did.
thing?
It absolutely did. So you had to hold down that button when you went off road. Which who's gonna first of all know what that button means and then remember to do it because they were having those and it doesn't happen
The
anymore.
lawyers put it there. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't. They don't need it anymore. They figured it out. They figured
They
it
can
out.
tune it now. But it's another thing when you're talking, okay, I'm going to modify my aftermarket vehicle versus I'm going to buy an OEM modified vehicle.
Yeah, sure.
There are certain advantages like that you would have no clue on until something happened.
Yeah.
You're the test dummy
Yeah.
all of a sudden versus us being the test dummies, and putting them through their paces.
So Matt, what's some of your favorite kind of factory Overlanders? Because this is not meant to be, it sounds like an AEV commercial because AEV is exceptional, but Dave didn't pay any money to be here. We asked him to be here.
Here, I can prove that it's not an AV commercial. Dave, you suck. See, I couldn't say that if it was.
It's true.
Yeah. But Matt's, what's some of your favorite
Okay, I
factory
think
Overlanders?
the Grenadier right now is pretty cool. I mean, you have those It has steel bumpers. It has locking differentials. It has a considerable payload. I mean, what we looked at mine's like 1,680 pounds.
Yeah, 1,580 pounds in a wagon. That's pretty good.
I think mine's at 16.
It very well could be.
Yeah,
very
which
well
is
could be.
like considerable, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think for technical terrain, JL370 from AEV. Well, I guess that's not factory; it's quasi-factory.
It just depends
20th anniversary edition's factory.
It depends on what you're doing, right? I mean, from a body structure and overlanding standpoint, the Grenadier is pretty brilliant. The body structure, no roll bar, metal top, ambulance door. I mean, there is a massive amount of room. It's a big vehicle. You know,
It's a big square
but
box.
the footprint's very similar to the Jeep.
It
right?
is, but
Like,
it's way more
that's
usable
what
space.
I like about it
way,
so much.
Way better usable space. The body structure is phenomenal.
Yeah.
But then, if you get into technical, like, okay, I want to go to Moab, it's not going to hold its own with the Jeep, right?
Yeah, the Jeep has a narrower body, same track width,
Same
but a
track width, narrower body,
so you're
right?
going to do less
damage prone.
body damage. Yeah.
Right now, I
Way
think
more articulation.
the other truck I'm really excited for is the HD Bison that you guys are now doing, and both like a GMC and Chevy variants.
That's a great, just all around.
like throw a like a Scout camper or a
Yeah.
4-wheel camper or something in that, and just like go.
Yeah, if you just want to go use a truck and not have any issues and just have a very, very comfortable truck. I mean, I know everybody's listening like, oh, they're so expensive. I get it, but if you buy a truck and modify it, same price, but you get all this engineering
Yeah.
and all the testing, so you have a lot of peace of mind in a completely unmodified heavy duty truck. It's a nice package for sure.
And I think like there's the Tacoma Trail Hunter, we have to say, just so it isn't
Yeah, and
all
it's got
AEV.
good, old man emu shocks on it, a pretty good rear bumper on it.
Yeah. I think
Heavy-
the new
more
Tacoma,
payload.
like I've stopped making fun of Tacomas.
Yeah, the new one's good.
Yeah.
9-speed transmission really helped it.
So there's that. I mean, I'm trying to go through my head and just not list all of the AEV trucks.
Another one is the Ford Ranger Raptor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't ever want to take anything away from the other Raptors. Personally, I don't care for them that much. It's not my style of driving, even though the Raptor R is a lot of fun. But like a Ranger Raptor is something you could drive every day. It's got
a really good size.
1,400 pounds of payload, front and rear lockers, and it's like $54,000. So it's kind of a shocker little
Does
truck.
that one have a front locker?
It does, front
No,
and rear locker.
I don't
Yeah.
think it does.
No, I think
Yeah.
it's the Bison.
No, it does.
Bison has a front. I thought the Ford didn't.
Ranger Raptor
True
has
Jack.
it. Promise.
Okay.
Oh heck! All right.
You probably know better than I do.
Well, because I found it by accident. I was going through the screens and I was like, front locker? It's weird. You have to go into the screen and then push the virtual button to lock the front. But
Okay, it's not a mechanical.
no, it's a mechanical locker.
Oh, you're saying
Front
this doesn't have an actual button?
Yeah, that's right. Which I don't care for. You have to go through a menu to get to it. But
No, I'll go look that up. The one that I thought was really impressive was the Australia market only Ranger Super Duty.
yes,
Yeah.
big
Now,
time.
I mean, that is pretty brilliant. I obviously haven't seen one or driven one, so I don't know, but just the thought of that.
Yes.
Because you have your go fast trucks. You've got your Ranger Raptor, your Bronco Raptor, your Raptor R. Those are not, I mean, let's face it, a Raptor is a F-150, yet Ford has intentionally separate it from, it's not an F-150, right? If
Right.
you go up to somebody and say, hey, I like your F-150, right? They're going to be kind of offended. It's
Sure.
a Raptor. And it's a brilliant marketing move. But it is, those are go fast trucks. They're pretty narrow focused.
Yeah.
They do a good job at what they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, if you look at what GM's doing with their the Bison or the AEV series of trucks on all the platforms, it's not narrowly focused. It's really broadly focused.
That's true.
And so it's a different thing, right? Are they as fast off road? I don't know. I'm going to say they shouldn't be, even though like the canyons or the Colorado Canyon is pretty damn good. I've never actually compared it with a Ranger Raptor. I bet it could hold its own, but
It can.
if you get
It
into the harder core off road stuff, I can guarantee you that the Bison, with all its skids and all its stuff,
and 35s, not 33s.
35s, and they even the tuning on the engine, right? They tuned it for 87 octane, whereas the Ranger's 91
Yep.
minimum. Things like that, right? If you're going to go around the world, you're going to do the stuff we do. I think the broader market is a much better choice. And, but I think a lot of people still confuse like marketing with like, oh, this is GM's version of the Raptor, which it's not. It's an overland focused vehicle. All of them.
They are.
Not.
That was their intention.
Right. They're not go fast. Whereas Raptor, and this is where the media gets it wrong too. The media is like, oh, this is a Raptor competitor. And
Sure.
no, it's not. It's like the TRX might be a Raptor competitor, not.
Sure.
You know, Chevy doesn't really have. They've chosen not to get into the desert race go fast market.
Right.
Per se. Right. At least to this point.
Yeah.
I mean, they have their own race teams that actually do really well, but they don't, you know, from an OE standpoint, they don't go after that narrow niche Southern California, Arizona market.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Well, we just did our big, midsize truck test, and I was shocked at how good all of the midsizes are now. I mean, think about it. Quartermaster, Ranger Raptor, GMC AT4X, AEV,
Gladiator.
Tacoma Trailhunter,
Yep.
Gladiator Max tow package, which gets you over 1,700 pounds of payload. Like the vehicles are better than they've ever been.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, for the editor's choice, I chose the GMC AT4X AEV because it did everything well. There wasn't
broad window.
Whereas every other vehicle had something that was a compromise or a more significant compromise, like the Max tow package Gladiator, no rear locker. So there was something that stood out that was problematic in the vehicle, except for the AT4X. And the Quartermaster, despite how much I love it, that's what I drive every day right now, it's $100,000. So that's a very big investment for people. So I had to be sensitive to the fact
you could buy an AT4X and like a gently used AEV Wrangler.
Or you buy an AT4X, you put a Go Fast on the top of it, and then you drive it around the world for the same money.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the Ineos is. I mean, they're a passionate.
Yes.
How can you not love the aesthetics and the whole? You guys both have them, right?
It's very Scotty.
They're very cool.
I really like mine. I haven't connected with a vehicle like that since my first Land Rover.
Right, but like every niche vehicle, and it's almost like what in the human psyche, what makes a niche vehicle is other people aren't willing to put up with the turning radius.
Sure.
Right, or
sure.
they're all of one comfortable position.
Yes,
at least
that's
for
right.
me, right?
Yeah.
But that's what makes a niche vehicle niche. That's what makes people like them because other people, won't have them.
They buck the trend.
They're right. They're standing out a little
Yeah.
bit by having this vehicle that most people just wouldn't do.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it cool, right? At the end of the day,
true.
even a Wrangler's the same way, right? A Wrangler's not super comfortable. I mean, they've gotten better over the years, but if you go back, somebody drove a Jeep was like, a little weird, right?
Yeah.
Wrangler's in an interesting spot right now. Like they're getting attacked
from every angle.
all angles.
From every angle.
Well, yeah, they are. They used to have no competition. Now they have a lot of competition. The past, this is interesting, honestly, because the past leadership came in, they kept raising the price. People dealt with it for a while, and then there was a very sudden and dramatic shift away from it because of the pricing, in my opinion.
I agree.
The good news is they've gotten a lot of leadership changes. They've gotten a lot of the old guard back in there. So, I'm really enthusiastic about what
how do we drag Mark Allen out of retirement?
Right.
Mark, if you're listening to this, we're all going to chip in some dollars to bring you back out of retirement.
Yeah, he and a lot of good engineers too. I mean, that's the part that's kind of intangible because you don't see them, you don't hear about them, but a lot of good engineers.
Yeah, some of them ended up at Scout.
They've ended up at Scout. They've ended up at Rivian, right? Designers and engineers have then ended up at, several other manufacturers, right?
Yep.
And so, I mean, look at the Bronco body structure.
I know.
I mean, if you look at the body structure without, without exterior sheet metal on, if you're just like open the rear tailgate and look in with no carpet, no everything. I mean, it's hard to tell. It's not a Wrangler. I mean, it's very, very similar. Same suppliers, right? Same suppliers are making the hardtop. Same suppliers are doing the sheet metals, the frames, right? I mean, it ends up like a lot of these trucks nowadays are pretty homogeneous. They have different exterior styling, but you see, even Toyota, right? Toyota has this legendary legacy of durability. But, I think my personal taste is that pretty much changed about 06, 07 and anything after, right? Because then they kind of became more like, we'll use this steering gear from this company. We'll use
this from Bosch. We're going to use this from you.
It's kind of now it's like every other truck, right? And luckily all cars are pretty good these days, but it's kind of funny that, the legacy still proceeds,
Yeah.
even though it's not really deserved, right? The reputation's there, but it's just like every other truck, and they're all good, though, honestly.
That's the upside for the consumer is if you go buy an AT4X, you're buying a great truck. If you go buy a Tacoma, you're buying a great truck. So, yeah.
It's interesting, like in the heavy duty, we have, I've recently purchased, well, I have the Chevys, I have the Rams, and I recently purchased the Ford just to kind of baseline everything. And it's interesting to see how the different manufacturers, how they approach things and how their take on different things and who they're going for, who they're aiming towards.
Yeah, sure.
I still like the Ford HD trucks the best. I don't know if that's what I would buy right now.
Yeah,
Because
There's a lot to like about them.
it's
but their
interesting for me.
drivetrain is so good.
Yeah,
like the
that's true.
6.7 motor is like
10
I
speed.
genuinely like
Yep.
it.
Yeah, no. So it's an interesting thing, and I'll try and stay independent of like the brand because everybody has their own thoughts. But yeah, customer facing, the Ford is really, really good. When you get in it, it's like, wow, this thing is crazy fast.
Yeah.
Does it need to be? No. Does it tow any better? No. Is it fast? Like for an unloaded driver, it just gets in at the dealership. It's impressive.
Yeah.
The Ram has finally caught up with
Sure.
the 8-speed.
And I just drove that, and it was great.
It is great.
It was great.
The Chevy has essentially the same 10-speed as the Ford, and it's great too. I mean, they're all all those trucks are really good in terms of power now. The Ram's finally caught up with the 8-speed. But they're all really impressive in terms of customer facing. The interior on the Ford is very good.
They really
customer
stepped
facing.
that up.
But if I put my engineering hat on and I open the hood of a Ford, I'm like, oh, this thing is more like Volkswagen. It's built for assembly. It's built for speed of assembly. What it's not built for is maintenance.
Or
Terrible.
maybe even the aftermarket.
You can actually
or longevity.
You can
honestly.
identify components on like the Cummins engine, and you could work on it. You could not access it.
Right.
Like when I was just saying how I loved the Ford 6.7, mine blew up. So it had to be
Probably wasn't the
replaced.
OE problem, though.
It wasn't an OE problem. It was not. Surprisingly, that motor actually made it hundreds of miles home. Anyways, but to replace that engine, the entire front of the vehicle had to come off. Normally, they would just raise the cab off.
But you have a giant house on top.
But I have a house on top of it. But the entire truck had to come apart. I mean, it is like shoehorned in there.
Yeah.
It's so complex. There's two cooling systems independent of each other.
Yeah, and a lot of little plastic fittings that over time with heat soaking, it's built for assembly. Like if you're planning to keep that truck for more than 5 years, that's gonna be a challenge.
No, that's
and that's
interesting.
something a consumer wouldn't know,
Yeah,
right? You go
that's
to the
good know.
dealership. From the consumer side, you look at the power, you look at the interior, the exterior styling is what it is. It's a matter of personal taste. It's within millimeters of the Ram. The Ford and the Ram are like within millimeters of each other. Chevy obviously has a different front suspension, which lays out different heights and
Sure.
a lot of different architecture. But then unless you're the engineer and you look at the wiring, let's say the Ford wiring is crazy. I mean, there's like sprouts sticking out everywhere. Trying to trace down problems would be challenging, whereas the Ram is very simple. For like longevity. Personally, I would still go with the Ram, even though, the suspension's identical, essentially. Although even when you start dialing in the suspension and axle choices, the vacuum hubs on the Ford, great initially. Again, customer facing, they've got manual hubs. That looks cool. People don't really understand maybe what they are, but it goes back to, you're like your
Sure.
granddad's Ford.
Totally.
It's got locking hubs, but then, but you're relying on vacuum most of the time, which is a potential failure point. So it just kind of comes down to like these things that are customer facing, maybe good, maybe bad. Really depends on what you're looking to do. If you just have a truck for 5 years, that Ford's pretty nice.
I bet because you're building the Prospectors with the 8-speed.
Yeah. We just went into production with the 25 with the 8-speed last week.
That's gotta rip.
Yeah, that makes a big difference. So they
Yeah,
they up the power.
I did the Davis Dam with that truck, like it was literally pulling a house.
And,
It was amazing.
And if the funny thing is, you go back last year to the Ram with the Eisen trans, which is essentially a Toyota transmission, 6-speed. It's a truck transmission, like a box truck transmission. Driving it around every day unloaded, terrible, right? I mean, it's clunky. It takes forever to go. Like, don't pull out in front of somebody. But when you start towing with it, if you want, once you get over 20,000 pounds, that combination is awesome, right? And you're ripping past, other trucks. It tows great but it's like that narrow window, right? And that's where, the 10-speed really benefits to the consumer facing thing when they just go to the dealership or they're just driving it every day. I mean, the Chevy and the Ford, have been for a while now, they've been way faster and they feel like a normal truck, whereas the Ram has always felt like a truck.
Like a truck, yeah.
Right. But that's kind of changing with the, with the new ZF8 speed,
I
which
actually
is
thought the
phenomenal.
Ram was the most comfortable, but
The Ram has the most, it feels like the most
but I
comfortable
always had the
interior.
2500s with the rear air.
Yeah.
They're all, I mean, honestly, all those trucks are comfortable. It's a matter of personal preference, what you like for the inside, what you like for the outside. The power's all good. For what we do, I have my personal preference.
Let's go through that. If you were to pick your favorite factory Overlander right now, what would you pick?
Factory. And these are ones that we do too, or
You
all
can
of
pick
them?
you can pick anything you want.
I don't know.
get
It
to
just
choose.
depends on what you're doing, and I do a lot of different things. Lately, I've been towing a lot of skid steers and excavators around, so probably the GM HD would be
Yeah.
top on my list. The Ford Tremor package, which is kind of their factory Overlander off-roader guy. I mean, really, it's a leveling kit and some little bit bigger wheel and tire. I don't, maybe a rear locker, I think.
Rear locker, and
Yeah.
you can get an
Yeah, but you can
optional,
get a rear locker on the Ford. You have
and
been
the
able to
Ram
for-
now,
Yeah.
and the Ram now.
Yep. So anyway, the Ford doesn't have as much suspension articulation as the Ram. But then I tend to get Rams in a lot, like I tend to get heavy duty trucks in a lot of weird situations that most people don't. So, for hardcore off-roading, I still prefer the Ram. If you're just a guy who, a modified Ram, I should say. If you're if you just want a truck that works every day and, it's hard to beat the Chevy.
So for you, it'd be the 2500 the GMC.
It's a pretty good
84X,
all-around truck. Like you can hook a skid steer to it or an excavator, and it doesn't know it's there. It can off-road reasonably difficult terrain. I mean, more difficult than most. Like 99% of people are going to put it in. You can put a camper in it. You can, and you have all that confidence in knowing that it was fully tested.
I think for me, and it's kind of a factory Overlander, except there's only one in existence. It'd be that regular cab GMC.
Oh, the one in our lobby.
Yes.
Yeah.
That truck turned out so good. And the fact that you have the improved ride quality, because I drive lots of miles off road.
Yeah.
So, and that's where like a Tremor really falls short is ride quality. It's a significant difference from the GMC. So I think it would either be that regular cab that you guys built with the lockers and everything, or it'd be the Quartermaster, which I'm really enjoying. So one of those two.
Yeah.
For me.
That GMC is cool. Unfortunately, that was a concept car. And we could do it. The problem was the way GM's done their electronics. We couldn't figure out the speedometer without their involvement.
Sure.
And then it comes down to lawyers, and they just would not give us the speedometer calibration. So that's why we don't have a GM on 40s. We did just introduce 37-inch kit. So you can take, if you buy an AEV or Bison now, heavy duty, you can get a pretty small kit, and you can put 37s on it with no suspension mods.
Wow.
That's pretty cool.
So that would probably be my pick. Would be the Bison with
because
the
that's kind of maybe the
37s.
downside of that truck is the 33s. I mean, the thing is like
35s.
35s from the factory.
on
The 1500s, the 33s.
Yeah, the heavy duty though comes with 35s.
Oh,
And you can basically put 37s on with this kit that we just introduced, which kind of, and honestly, you can put 37s on it right away. But if you buy our kit, then you still have full turn, full jounce, full travel with no issues. And we also did a wheel for it that pushes the wheel out a little bit, just for a little bit improved looks. And that would, I mean, that is an
Such
awesome
a sick truck.
Yeah,
Such a sick truck.
it's an awesome truck.
What do you think, Matt?
Grenadier. If it wasn't the Grenadier,
You love your truck. I love that.
I genuinely,
you genuinely
like
love
it.
it.
I'm geeking out with it. It's so easy to modify. There's wiring channels run.
Yes, for everything.
For aftermarket wiring. There's grounds everywhere.
I mean, it was made for this market,
It's
right?
so-
It's kind of what Wrangler has. They lost their way on that,
Yeah.
going with this kind of commercial Southern California kind of market.
The
the parts.
Grenadier makes the Wrangler feel like a toy. to me. That's just like my opinion.
But that's
like,
also what makes the
perform-
Wrangler great.
They perform
Yeah.
so much better, but like, I don't care about the removable top anymore. Like ever since they went to 4 doors, like 5 people have ever taken them off. Like, you know, I think
But you
the
can
2
have it
doors
as a
great.
soft top, and it's so nice.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure.
Drop the
But,
top
like,
on it.
Yeah. I mean, there's a big
the
benefit
problem
to
is
that, though.
The problem
yeah.
is that the Wrangler is so expensive now,
That's true.
and there's a
That's true.
spread. Like a Wrangler's has an MSRP over $100,000 with a V8,
Yeah.
and like yeah, the V8's great, cool, whatever. It's not that fast. Like it's fast.
It's fun.
Pretty
It's
fast.
fun.
It's fun.
But like, but is it $110,000 car?
No, but I'd say that's like this. That's a niche car that for
Yeah.
collectors. That it was kind of cool that they did for collectors.
For sure. For
For
sure.
you know, for enthusiasts. I'll only say collectors, but I'll say enthusiasts.
Both,
It was
yeah.
cool that they did that.
Yeah.
But you know, if you go back to like, I mean, a 4xe has a lot of technology. A 4xe, it's funny. I just wrote an email to our company internally, and it's called "Why the 4xe is Brilliant."
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people understand the advantages of a 4xe, and even within our company, people didn't know.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love
Yeah,
it.
Tavia has
Yeah,
one.
Tavia has one. Love it.
did you guys know that one of the motors? So there's 2 motors on it, and one of the motors replaces the torque converter in the
Yes.
transmission.
That's right.
So if
Yeah,
you think
so
about
much
that,
in
like
there.
there's your number one failure point of an automatic transmission, especially off road, especially slow speed off road, right? People not using 4-low, but now, you know, by replacing that torque converter, I mean, it's pretty cool. It's like, it's not a lot of like, I think people think it's like some sort of like crazy technology that you can't repair underneath and everything. It's really not. It's like they took the torque converter, number one failure point, and replaced it with an electric motor. So that's
And isn't
brilliant.
it like a 100 horsepower electric motor, something like that?
I don't know.
I think so.
I'm not sure the numbers off my top of my head. And then, you know, then they have this alternator slash motor up on the motor. And then part of my email was to my internal team was like, guys, if you live out west, think about this. You know, a lot of towns are in valleys, so you're just driving around all day
Yep.
in town, right? And then if you go somewhere else, it's a long distance. So you know, here's the hybrid. It works out great. You never use gas, and then you use gas, and you don't even have to think about it. You just go. Altitude,
Yeah.
right? The 4-cylinder turbo and the electric motor, neither of them are affected by, you know,
Could care
10,000
less.
feet, right?
Could care
and
less.
if you look at the 3.6, 280 horse, you know, 5,000 feet, you know, it's 3% per 1,000 feet. So you're down, you know, 15 or 5,000 feet, you're down 15%. At 10,000 feet, you're down 30%.
Yeah,
Right.
so
if
in,
you're
in Leadville, you're feeling it.
Oh yeah, or even like, you know, Truckee Tahoe, right?
Sure.
I mean, you're down whatever 24% or whatever that is. It adds up really fast. So you know, the 4xe doesn't experience those
You can
issues.
turn the air conditioning on that through their app.
Absolutely. And also, like,
No, because
it's
that's a huge thing. It's cooling down your car.
Yeah,
You can
that's
turn
right.
the electricity. You can use the electricity to turn it on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do that in the.
We're just
Tesla.
going off road and shutting off the engine. You can go into electric only, and you've got 20 miles of range off road. You're in low range. It works like a regular Jeep.
Yeah.
You can left foot brake with it. It'll climb any ledge that a normal Jeep will climb. It doesn't have any of those limitations that electric vehicles have sometimes off road. Regular transmission, and it's silent.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It's so great.
And
so
on the
great.
road, it's fast.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's not
400 and something horsepower.
It's not V8, but it's right there. I mean, it's better than the 3.6.
Yeah, it's like mid 5s, 0 to 60, and the V8 is high 4s, so it's
Yeah.
barely a second slower.
That's fast,
the V8.
fast enough for a Jeep.
Oh, for sure.
But to get rid of the number one failure point in the transmission, and you know, and to not be affected by altitude if you're out west, and because of the nature of those towns, I mean, those are major advantages.
Oh yeah.
Because a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to plug it in. I'm like, don't just put it in gas and it'll charge itself and it'll do its own thing, and you don't even have to worry about it. Just, you know, it's better.
But
it's
if you do have a plug in your garage, you wake up in the morning, you go get coffee, and you've used no gas.
And also
Right.
think of the potential of the platform. The energy density of the batteries is increasing. You're going to get more range out of that. I mean, I think if I could have a plug-in hybrid
Yep.
with 100 miles of range, that would be perfect.
Yeah, and I haven't driven the Toyota. I hear it's great.
Yep.
But it's, you know, that newer technology is coming online.
The
pretty
Range
quick.
Rover has the best,
60,
I think, out
60
there. Right now.
mile range plus fast charging.
Yeah, because it's really like, it's that 100-kilometer standard that
Yeah,
I think
sure.
a lot of car companies are trying to get to. 100 miles would maybe be a wish, but
If I look at a Jeep, if I can use electric to get going, right? Like that's most of your, 0 to, getting on the highway speed, right? You're using a lot more energy to do that than to go down the highway. So if you can use the electricity to do that and then regenerate it, and that's why they get 24 miles a gallon with Rubicon tires.
Absolutely.
That's
Tavia's Jeep
pretty
on
impressive.
35s. We plug it in every single night. Most of our errands are done in electric only, and that will consistently show 26, 28 miles a gallon average.
It's really impressive.
It's insane.
And then there's some, like the Ram Charger, the new Ram Charger.
Yeah, I haven't driven that
is
yet.
that
I
actually
haven't
going to
either.
come out?
Yep. And it's that's some really cool technology, right?
Yeah.
Because that's basically a Pentastar
Yep.
as a motor
like
generator unit.
2,000 RPM, right? So you're not really going to hear it. And again, altitude doesn't, it's not that big a deal, right? And then you've got 650 horse and 650 torque
Crazy.
in a half-ton truck. That's going to be kind of but it's expensive, right? That's why the factories don't like hybrid, right? It's cheaper to go one way or the other.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's not. It's to do both is obviously very cost effective, or not very cost effective.
No,
I'm
this
just
is
sitting
great.
here talking about Jeeps, and I'm like, dang, I should not have sold my LJ.
Yes,
'Cause that was
you should have sold your LJ because now you have your Grenadier and you're happy. Like you don't need a Jeep and your Grenadier.
But I want it.
But how has that worked for you in the past?
Totally fine.
Your Grenadier is perfect. That thing is so sweet. That thing is so Matt Scott. I love it.
Yeah, it is definitely you.
Well, this is a great conversation.
Yeah.
But it's funny. Jim at OK left me his Grenadier last year for a couple weeks while it was shipping around, and they said, drive it, and I did. I drove it around. It's cool. At the time, nobody really had one,
Yeah.
so it's kind of cool to have the only one,
Sure.
around. But I did find myself, like, I drove it for a couple days, and then I was like,
Yeah, but then you knew.
Yeah, I did. And I was like, man, if I could put this body on a JL chassis,
Sure.
right, get the suspension and the steering and the handling qualities, and then if it only, like, for me, it wasn't comfortable. Like,
The
it
seats
is
need
one.
lumbar.
The seat, the armrest, the armrest is low. It's like for me, I was just like, I guess maybe I'm just getting too old for that anymore.
No, but that's the cool thing is that there's more than one option. So
I think it's so hard for a car to have emotion.
Yeah.
And the Grenadier does that really well.
Yeah, for sure.
Honestly,
It is.
I hated mine for the first 2 months. Like the steering drove me crazy. Like I couldn't get comfortable in
beeping.
it. The beeping, the constant beeping.
the clicking and the beeping. Yeah.
And then I don't know what happened. Like something just, but then I kept, it's like the car that you walk away from when you look back. at it. It kept growing on me. And now I'm just like, I love it.
Well, that's often the case. The cars that do have some emotion, they have problems, that you're willing to deal with, that nobody else is, and that's why you have it, right? So you kind of earned it.
Yeah.
But generally, they're not perfect, right?
Yeah.
The ones that have the most emotions, like I have a Viper,
Yeah.
terrible car to drive around on the street, honestly. But, it's still the one I'll never sell. It's the one that still makes my hand shake if I take it on a spirited run,
Yeah.
Makes you smile.
Yeah, and I've
you
owned
turn
that,
around and look back at it when you walk away from it.
the car's stunning, right?
It is stunning for
It's
sure.
stunning. But it's there's very few of them. You never see another one. It's absolutely terrifying. Even now, and even though I trust the car, it's terrifying to drive. It should be on a track,
Yeah.
right? And when it's not on a track, it does not. It's it's terrible to
You're
drive.
tempting fate.
Yeah.
I hear you thought flying was dangerous. Drive a Viper.
Yeah, it's kind of more like a sport bike.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's got the same issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, I tell people, it's like, it's just like a motorcycle. It's like, you don't want to drive it at night. You don't want to drive more than 2 hours. And, it's better on a track than on the road.
Yeah, sure.
But it's also why I love it.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah. So,
Well, thanks everybody.
Yeah, this was so great. Thank you, Dave, for always coming on the podcast. We appreciate it. We get such great feedback
I always
when you're
learn
on here.
stuff.
So, and I learned again several things today. So,
good. Well, anytime.
yeah, we appreciate you, Dave.
Well, cool. Thanks for listening to the Overland Journal podcast. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.